The high-level general debate of the 77th session of the UN General Assembly gathers heads of state and high officials in New York. Hurricane Fiona strengthened with sustained winds of 175 km per hour and rises to Category 3, according to the U.S. National Hurricane Center. Russian President Vladimir Putin said the formation of a multipolar, more democratic and just world order system is ongoing. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In New York, the United States, United Nations started the first day of the high-level general debate of the 77th session of its General Assembly. This is the first entirely in-person General Assembly meeting since the start of the pandemic. Heads of state, heads of government and top diplomats are attending from around the globe. Among the main topics, they discuss global conflicts, economic fallout after COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, and the social inequities that minorities still face worldwide. The president of Honduras, Xiomara Castro, stated that the level of poverty that exists in her countries and around the world is due to monetary policies that do not respond to the needs of the most vulnerable.
However, it is my firm belief that none of these figures will astound anyone in a world which today lives under monetary dictatorship. A monetary dictatorship which imposes draconian measures of fiscal discipline on the poorest among us, a monetary dictatorship which increases the suffering of the majority left behind, and a monetary dictatorship in which speculative capital has no limits.
The president of Bolivia, Luis Arce, during his speech declared that the unipolar world is coming to an end.
Observe the final chapter of the unipolar world, the construction of a new world order that we hope will be for the benefit of all states and of all peoples is inexorable. And as we are convinced that another world is possible.
In the same line, the Bolivian president stressed that multilateralism must be promoted as a way of resolving differences that may exist between countries.
Multilateralism is the only mechanism that represents a guarantee of respect among states independently of their economic or military power. Therefore, we consider that any breach of international peace and security is linked to the inadequate implementation of the mechanisms provided for in the United Nations Charter.
The president of Peru addressed the UN General Assembly to condemn territory occupations and reaffirmed that unilateral sanctions will not solve conflicts.
Are not good and bad interventions. Moreover, all types of sanctions other than those adopted by the Security Council as part of its action to preserve peace and security are illegitimate and run counter to international law. Any other types of unilateral sanction are illegitimate and again run counter to international law. This includes economic sanctions. Once wars or aggressions have occurred, the duty of the international community is to work to ensure a ceasefire and the resolution of conflicts through peaceful means, and this through diplomatic negotiations. We must not provide incentives for conflict. We must make peace our mission.
Also during his intervention, the Peruvian president spoke about the damage that climate change is doing to the planet due to man's actions.
This year, climate change has meant that extreme heat and floods have reached their worst levels in history. Greenhouse gas levels continue to rise. These are the cries of Mother Earth. She is asking us not to continue assaulting nature. I issue an appeal, particularly to the industrialized nations, to find new momentum to halt global warming.
For his part, Turkey President Recep Tayyip Erdogan emphasized the COVID-19 pandemic showed the need to establish international solidarity among nations.
One of the biggest lessons we had learned out of the pandemic was to establish international solidarity in the resolution of global threats. As Turkey, during the pandemic, without any discrimination, we have managed to provide humanitarian aid to more than 161 countries and 12 international organizations. And we have provided Turcovac, which is our national and local vaccine, to the service of the entire human race.
The President of France, Emmanuel Macron, called for new forms of cooperation to face the challenges that are affecting the world during his speech at the UN General Assembly.
Challenges facing us are more urgent and they require new forms of cooperation. Let us look at Pakistan. A third of the country is underwater. Over 1,000, many people have died and were injured. The Horn of Africa, the worst drought for 40 years, a rainy season which will undoubtedly be even worse. Half of humanity is living in an area of climate danger. Our ecosystems are reaching the point of no return, and so many people today are in conflict-affected countries. Given these crises, climate change, pandemics, the spike in food prices, the most vulnerable people are always the worst affected. Much of these problems are caused by divisions between us. Therefore, it is our shared responsibility, must be to help the most fragile, to help the most vulnerable to cope with these challenges.
Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi affirmed this Monday during a meeting with his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron that Iran is ready to conclude a fair and sustainable nuclear deal. The meeting took place on the silence of the United Nations General Assembly in New York. Raisi said that Europe must demonstrate in a practical way that its policies are independent and do not follow U.S. guidelines. In turn, Macron said Iran and the IAEA can solve the remaining problems and stressed that Paris will not put political pressures on the agency in this regard. Iran has been negotiating for 17 months with Germany, France, the United Kingdom, Russia, China, and indirectly with the United States, the restoration of the 2015 nuclear agreement. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. Authorities of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic have urged Moscow for a speedy unification with Russia following a referendum. The head of the self-proclaimed Republic of Donetsk, Denis Pushilin, urged Russian President Vladimir Putin to consider a prompt unification of this region with Russia in case the decision on the referendum is positive. Pushilin said his people deserve to be part of the great country, which they have always considered their homeland. He also said the referendum is scheduled to be held between September 24th and 27th, and that the voting will be telematic, so Donetsk citizens who are currently abroad will be able to vote remotely. Russian President Vladimir Putin said the formation of a multipolar, more democratic and just world order system is ongoing.
This objective development towards a multipolarity unfortunately encounters the resistance of those who want to maintain the role of hegemon in world affairs and control everything: Latin America, Europe, Asia, and Africa. It must be said that this hegemon has been doing quite well for quite some time, but it cannot go on like this forever. It's impossible. I'm even talking about this now outside the context of the events that are taking place in Ukraine.
In the same context, the Russian president stressed that his country will maintain its foreign policy.
As Russia is concerned, we will not turn away from our sovereign course. As a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, we intend to continue to promote unifying interstate agenda, to contribute to finding effective responses to the numerous challenges and threats of our time, and to help resolve acute regional conflicts. It is from this perspective that Russia will address the 77th session of the UN General Assembly.
Hurricane Fiona strengthened with sustained winds of 175 km per hour and raises to Category 3, according to the U.S. National Hurricane Center. In the Dominican Republic, the onslaught of the atmospheric phenomenon displaced hundreds of families after their homes were flooded or without roofs due to the heavy rains and strong winds that lashed from the early hours of Monday morning until around noon. Fiona is still expected to continue strengthening into a major hurricane in the coming hours, with storm surge of 1.5 to 2.4 meters above normal tide expected for the Turks and Caicos Islands through Tuesday. Typhoon Namadol, the 14th typhoon of this year, has weakened to an extratropical cyclone on Tuesday after making landfall in Japan's southwestern region of Kyushu, with the transport systems resuming in succession. Authorities report that pedestrian volume and traffic flow on the streets returned to normal. However, they warned the public that expressways have not yet opened to traffic due to the clearance work and safety confirmation. Meanwhile, 8 people were slightly injured in Kumamoto Prefecture, and repair works were carried out in some areas where the power was cut off due to the typhoon. According to the country's state broadcaster, 2 people were reported dead and another missing up to now after the powerful typhoon landed. Venezuelan diplomats highlight the planned Vuelta Patria return to the homeland, which allows thousands of Venezuelans to return to their country after being victims of xenophobia and discrimination.
I want to share with this honorable committee a plan called Vuelta a la Patria, Return to Homeland, which facilitated the voluntary and dignified return of thousands of Venezuelans emigres, many of whom have been flown back in our national airline Conviasa, rescuing them from a massive violation of their basic rights. They were victims of xenophobia, discrimination, and social exclusion.
We have more news coming up after a financial break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. In Palestine, Israeli occupation forces detained 14 citizens in the occupied territories, 6 of them residents of East Jerusalem. Palestinian authorities report that at least 14 arbitrary arrests in different parts of the occupied territories over the last 24 hours. They say that Israeli soldiers raided villages, set up vehicle checkpoints in several regions, claiming they were searching for terrorist assets. This as part of the so-called Break the Wave operation, in which joint Israeli security forces involving the security agency and the border police carried out operations in several towns and villages Monday night. On Tuesday, the head of the vaccine strategy of the European Medicines Agency, Marco Cavalieri, said at a conference that COVID-19 pandemic deaths and cases are decreasing in Europe, but the country must be prepared for the new wave of infections in line with the trend shown by the virus.
Data collected by the ECDC showed that in the last weeks there has been a decrease in the overall number of cases and deaths caused by COVID-19 in Europe. However, as autumn approaches, we need to prepare for a new wave of infections, in line with the trend shown by the virus in the past 2 years.
Also, the Chief of Medical Officer from the European Medicines Agency, Stefan Verstrup, said that the pandemic is still ongoing in Europe and members of states must be prepared to roll out vaccines, especially the adapted vaccines. This in response to President U.S. Biden in an interview aired by CBS on Sunday, where he said that the pandemic in the U.S. was over.
question. I can obviously not answer why President Biden came to that conclusion. What is clear to me, and what should be very clear from Dr. Cavalier's presentation, is that we in Europe still consider the pandemic as ongoing, that it's important that member states prepare for rollout of the vaccines, and especially the adapted vaccines, to prevent further spread of this disease in Europe.
This September 24th, teleSUR invites you to see a brand new documentary titled Alex Saab, a kidnapped diplomat. The audiovisual features testimonies from lawyers, experts, and family members of Alex Saab, including his wife Camila Fabri. All of them will reveal details never known before about the first kidnapping of a diplomat in the history of the world. It also compiles the actions taken by the U.S. government toward countries and individuals to ambush Saab in Cape Verde. Authorities in the island country imprisoned the Venezuelan high government official without an arrest warrant against him. Don't miss the documentary Alex Saab, a kidnapped diplomat, only on teleSUR. We have come to the end of this news briefing. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. And now you can also follow us on TikTok at the account at teleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. For teleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.